Welcome to Sparks of History, where Jewish history and world history meet. We are very pleased and honored to have with us today Rabbi Moshe Zeldman. Rabbi Zeldman earned a BA in philosophy and artificial intelligence from the University of Toronto. And Rabbi Zeldman earned his Rabbinic Ordination, Semicha, from Aish HaTorah. Rabbi Zeldman has taught Jewish thought, machshava, and leadership development seminars to beginners and advanced audiences in over 20 countries around the globe. Additionally, as part of the Aish HaTorah team, Rabbi Zeldman developed new branches of Aish HaTorah in Chile, Mexico, and Costa Rica. Currently, Rabbi Zeldman is also the founder and director of an organization called Meet the Israelis. And Meet the Israelis is a nonprofit organization based in Jerusalem, whose highly innovative programs expose participants to the cultural, ethnic, and political diversity of Israeli society. And today we'll be exploring the fascinating topic of Bible Torah codes and how artificial intelligence, AI, impacts on Torah biblical codes. Rabbi Zeldman, thank you for being with us. We appreciate it very much.
My pleasure. Looking forward to having a great conversation.
Thank you. To get started, how would you define the basic concepts of biblical Torah codes? Are they truly hidden messages, or are they patterns we impose on the text?
It's a very good question. And I think where the question is coming from is, we're familiar with the idea that sometimes people can find patterns because they want them to be there, even if they're not really there. You can read into things. We're all familiar with the idea of, people that read their horoscopes in the newspaper and it says, you'll meet somebody interesting this week. And then lo and behold, because you were whatever predetermined to want to find it, you'll find patterns. You'll say, oh my gosh, there's a new bus driver today. My horoscope was true. So we're familiar with the idea that people can find patterns even if they're not there. Certainly the idea of a code in a Torah, you're talking about a huge text and you're counting through the letters. It's true that if a person wanted to, you could find any code in any book. That's definitely true. When we talk about Torah codes, we're talking about a very rigorous scientific approach where, and we can get into the details, but it's that when we find a pattern of codes, find a phrase of some sort, we have ways of testing it to make sure that it's not a random finding and to make sure that it is something unique and that's actually there, not just something that we, like you said, that we imposed. The details of how we do it and how we measure it and how we verify it, I can get into, but the basic answer to your question is, we know it's not something we're imposing because we have scientific ways of measuring and testing the results we find.
Okay, I think we'll get to that. But before we do, is there a historical basis for Torah codes and the belief that they are meaningful? And do we find any Jewish sources that mention this idea?
100%. The truth is, the only reason people, let's say, the famous example is Rabbi Chaim Dov Weissmandel, who was involved with saving Jews in the Holocaust from Slovakia. He was a big Rosh Hashiva. So he quoted many early sources. In the 1950s, he quoted sources of Kabbalah going back hundreds of years as the basis of why he, in the modern day, looked for patterns of codes. Of course, he didn't have a computer, 1940s, 1950s, but he looked for codes and he found them and he published a whole book of them. He brings sources like, the most basic source I'll tell you is the Zohar. The Zohar is kind of the starting point. And the Zohar has this fascinating idea where it says that when God created the world, he first created the Torah as like a blueprint and then consulted the blueprint and then designed the world around the blueprint. Istakel ba'oraita ubare alma. So there's this concept that the Torah isn't just a book of instructions given at Mount Sinai. The Torah is, in a sense, the architectural underpinning, the blueprint for how the whole world functions. So the Vilna Gaon, hundreds of years later, the Vilna Gaon, commenting on that idea, makes the following statement. He says, every single detail of every single human being and every single species and every single event in the whole history of humanity is all found and coded in the text from the beginning of Genesis to the end of Deuteronomy, from the 5 books of Moses. Every detail of every event, every human being, minor, major, is all found in the text. And it's because that's a blueprint. The blueprint is so precise that it includes every detail. The Ramban talks about codes, the Rabbeinu Bechaya, Rabbi Moshe Zeldman, many of the Kabbalists talk about codes. So all we're doing in the modern day is we're looking for codes because we already have a very strong Jewish tradition that they're there. Our job is just to see if we can actually discover them.
And what are some of the most compelling examples of codes that have been rediscovered? And again, as you mentioned, how do they fit into the rigorous parameters that Torah codes have to comply with?
So here's what we do. I'll give you sort of the algorithm of how we work, and then I'll give you the example that we found using the algorithm. We will take the text of Torah, 304,805 letters long. That's the entire text in Hebrew of the original Torah, the original Bible. We have it on a computer, and we give the computer a series of words to look for encoded in the text. Now, we know these words are related. So a famous example would be, the Twin Towers, 9/11. So we know in history, there's a very direct connection between the word Twin Towers, the word explosion, the phrase 9/11, the name Bin Laden, the word New York, the word airplane. These words we know, because of a historical event, are viscerally connected to each other. We say, computer, look at Twin Towers. Migdalot HaTeomim, that's what Twin Towers are called. Migdalot HaTeomim. So the computer is going to go through the entire text of the 5 books to see if there's anywhere a pattern of the phrase Twin Towers that would appear every one letter, every second letter, skipping every other letter, every third letter, every fourth, every fifth, every sixth, every seventh. It'll keep looking and looking and looking until it finds some equal skipping code of the word Twin Towers. So the computer takes a few minutes, it finds the phrase Twin Towers. Okay. The fact that we found a word in a book or a phrase in a book in and of itself doesn't mean anything. I could probably look in Harry Potter in Hebrew or English and find Twin Towers also encoded some equal number of letters because it's a huge text. But here's where it gets interesting. We now tell the computer to look for the word September 11th. September 11th on the Hebrew calendar of that year, 2001, was the 23rd of Elul, Chaf Gimel Elul. You say, computer, go through the entire text like you did the first time. Where is there an equal skipping code of the phrase September 11th, Chaf Gimel Elul, 23rd of Elul? Computer goes through and it finds that that phrase happens to land in the same region of text as the phrase Twin Towers.
With the same pattern? With the same pattern? With the same pattern?
It's a difference. It's always an equal skip of letters. The number of letters in between is always going to be different. Okay, always every word is going to have a different. But the fact that they all appear encoded, like the word twin, towers, Bin Laden, September 11th, Yishmael, terrorism. The fact that all these words appear encoded in the same area, very close to each other, where they could have landed anywhere in a 300,000 letter text, that already tells us there's definitely something unique here. Now, what we do next to really test it is we say, you know what? Let's take a random book that's the same size in Hebrew as the book of Torah, same 300,000 letters, and let's tell the computer to look for the exact same thing with the same rigor and the same algorithm in that text. So it's going to look for the word Twin Towers, skipping every 1, every 2, every 3, every 4, every 5. It's going to look for the word 23rd of Elul. It's going to look also every 2, 3, 4, 5. It rarely finds in other books any time there any kind of proximity of related phrases being near each other. So in other words, you might tell me if we looked in War and Peace, take the Hebrew book, the Hebrew translation of Tolstoy's War and Peace. We look for the code there. It says twin over here, hour over here, September 11th over here, Bin Laden over there. No big deal. But when we check thousands of other random books, or tens of thousands, or sometimes hundreds of thousands of other random books, and we find that it's only in Torah that the words appear, including just scrambling up texts. Any other random book that we look at, we almost never find any kind of a correlation of words being near each other. Does that answer your question?
That does answer the question. And any other compelling examples?
So sure. I mean, well, I'll put it like this. For every major event that happens in the world, we are curious and we look to see if there's codes about those events. So, in modern times, I would say we had a lot of findings about the coronavirus. So we just literally tell the computer to find the word corona, the word virus, the word China, the word pandemic, the word vaccination, like just related words. They all appear encoded in the same area. Tell the computer to look for the word Ukraine, Zelensky, war, Russia, Putin, border, explosions, soldiers, casualties. They all appear encoded near each other. We tell the computer to look for Hamas, October 7th, Nova Music Festival, Kibbutz Be'eri, the names of the hostages. And again, we find those words encoded. And like I say, for every time we find a bunch of words in a cluster, uniquely in a compact area in Torah, we check 100,000 other books, or sometimes even more, and we just don't find those kind of patterns anywhere in any other random book.
And how
So
do
I'll put it like this: there's no major event in history that we've looked for that we have not found codes for. We
and
found codes about the attempted assassination on Trump. Right, he was on the golf course, and the CIA found a guy hiding in the bushes over there. So I don't remember his name now, but the word Trump, golf, the name of the assassin, the words all appear there.
and when
To date.
when we say in the same region, how is that defined? How is the same textual region defined?
So what would help is, man, I'm thinking when we finish the podcast, I'll actually send you a couple of samples we can put on the screen. It'll be easier to see it. It'll be hard
Excellent.
for me right now to call it up. I can send you a couple of samples, but it's essentially saying once the computer finds a word, let's say a computer finds a word every 82 letters, it'll set up a screen with 82 letters per line so that you can see the word vertically going down. And then we look for other codes and see if they appear near it. We literally just measure, this word is 8 letters apart, this other word is 12 letters apart, or further away, 20 letters further away. We're measuring overall how close the words are compared to how they are in random text. Like I said, the analogy I always use when I teach this as a presentation is I say, and I think it's a fairly accurate analogy. Imagine you're standing on the roof of the Empire State Building. If you make a paper airplane and you throw it out, it'll spin around Manhattan for 10 minutes until it lands on, I don't know, top of some shoe store on 42nd Street. You make a second paper airplane, you also throw it out. It spins also. It's flying all over Manhattan randomly. Then you notice that it landed on top of the same roof of the same shoe store on 42nd Street. So it's like, what are the odds of 2 airplanes that could have landed anywhere in Manhattan landing that close? And we take a third airplane, a third word, Zelensky, Putin, Ukraine, war, Russia. We keep throwing out airplanes. We keep looking for they could land anywhere. And we find them so close to each other that we can statistically measure how unlikely it is to be by chance. I'll tell you the follow-up to this is we were so, as a research team, we were so impressed by how strong the findings were that we actually got a top journal of statistics, a world-renowned journal of statistics at Stanford University, to publish the results in a scientific peer-reviewed paper. Now, once you publish a scientific result saying there are hidden divine codes in the Bible, you're going to get a lot of pushback. And we got a lot of pushback from every corner of the world. There was a very, very vigorous, nasty, hostile reaction from many scientists, mostly Israelis, but also Russians and Australians and Canadians and Americans and from all over the place. And they really pushed us very hard on it. How did you know how to spell the names properly? And how did you measure it? And which other texts did you try? They went through it with a fine-tooth comb. They ended up themselves publishing their own paper 5 years later, 4 or 5 years later, claiming that they think we could have cheated. They found some areas in our experiment where they think there was room for us to play around. So what we did is we have since then published 3 other papers in 3 other journals to show that there's no possible way that there could have been any kind of manipulation. So there are now 4 or 5 published papers in top scientific journals that show the code result is real. To this day, I'm not aware of any scientist anywhere in the world who has any refutation of any of the results.
When people hear the phrase Bible codes as opposed to Torah codes. Do they think that it is the Bible as the Christian world speaks of it, that it is a combination of the old and the new, and that's how they understand Bible codes? And what does that mean?
It's a really good question. So we ourselves always called it Torah codes, right? We're Torah believing Jews. We relate to it as Torah. We study Torah. We believe in Torah. But when we published it in the open world, we said this the vernacular word in an academic journal is we called it, Bible studies. We made it very clear as the Old Testament is the five books of Moses. But what happened was once it got published and it became so public, there were many Christians that tried to find codes in the New Testament. Hundreds of attempts by hundreds of not scientists exactly, but whatever Christian researchers to look for codes about Jesus and codes about Mary and the Virgin Mary and whatever stuff like that. They looked in the English New Testament and in the Hebrew and in the Latin and the Italian and all kinds of different versions and the King James and the New English version and they found nothing. There's absolutely no scientifically credible results that have been found by Christians, by Hindus, by Muslims in any other religious texts. But the word Bible code is because the Christians really worked hard and put a lot of stuff online. We found these hidden codes, but none of it has any scientific credibility.
And are Torah codes meant to be a proof for divine authorship? Are they meant to be a support, but not a proof for divine authorship? Or are they just one component in an entire picture of Jewish belief?
It's a good question. Well, I'll tell you this, as a starting point, just the idea that there's a thing called proofs and logical evidence for Torah being true, that itself is a chiddush. It's a bit of a surprise to people because a lot of people who aren't deeply familiar with Jewish philosophy assume that Judaism is like other religions, which is essentially just a leap of faith. This is what I was raised with. This is what I was taught to believe. I'm not supposed to question it. I just have to kind of blindly have faith and accept it as true. And that's never been the case for Torah. The Rambam, the Ramban, the Kuzari, the Chovos HaLevavos, all the major commentaries going back over 1,000 years, all made it very clear that our belief in Torah should be based on some logical, rational foundation, not just it feels right or that's how I was raised. I'm not going to question it. So the idea of logical evidence, logical proofs, you can call it, has always been part of Jewish tradition. The idea of codes was never given as one back in the old day because they didn't have computers. So there was no way of really rigorously testing it. So if you were to ask me, I would say, what's my evidence that Torah really is divine? I can give you an argument from prophecies in history that came true. I can give you an argument about signs of kosher animals that Moses couldn't have known about thousands of years ago in the desert. I can ask you, how do you explain how millions of people stood at Har Sinai, Mount Sinai, and claimed they had a revelation if the revelation never happened? In other words, there are many classical traditional proofs of Torah being true. There's a good 5 or 6 that we use on a regular basis in seminars. Codes is a new one, but I do believe it belongs in the category of proof, especially in our day, right? We live at a time now where we're kind of very science oriented, right? We make decisions about medicine based on scientific research, right? We have a null hypothesis. We do testing. We do control tests. We publish articles. We do peer reviewed studies. That's how we determine what's true in our modern scientific world. So the fact that the Torah has that dimension to it, that even to the modern scientist, we can speak the language of math and statistics and statistical interpreting probability and statistical significance, that adds a new element to Torah being true for people today who need a more scientific kind of approach.
As you mentioned, with the advent of computers, the ability to check, verify statistically, Torah codes obviously took a great leap. Now that we have AI, artificial intelligence, can AI be used to find Torah codes more effectively than in the past? And what are the implications of bringing AI into the Torah codes field?
Really good question. So we definitely do use AI. I don't think we've yet capitalized on how to totally use AI for all of its benefits towards codes research. But I'll tell you the area we have used it in, that a lot of the critics that we have will claim that when we're looking for a subject, we're doing codes about 9/11 or about the war with Hamas October 7th. They'll claim that there's a certain amount of latitude we have in us deciding which are going to be the words to look for. Do we look for the word Hamas? What about the word Hezbollah? Do we find kibbutz Be'eri? What about Nova? Do we look for the word war or the word battle? Do we look for the word missile? Do we look at? There's so many possibilities, so that a critic can say, well, you had 50 possible words. You took the 10 that worked in your favor. You ignored the failures and took the ones that were on your side. AI can give us a much more objective list of words. I can ask ChatGPT, we're doing research on the topic of October 7th. Do a scan of the current literature and tell me what are the 10 or 20 most popular phrases in order of significance, in order of popularity, and the most proper spellings of those phrases. So then it's not me deciding, it's not another researcher deciding. It's a much more clear algorithm that's objective, that tells us what to look for, and it removes any kind of human manipulation of the data that we're using. So that we've used very successfully. That's actually been very much in our favor.
Do you think that AI will get to a point where you can ask AI, ChatGPT AI,
Mm.
whatever it is, and say, please give me a 300,000 word document that will statistically have a sequence for these 1,000 historical events. And then you have a document parallel to the Torah.
Good question. Yes, I think it's possible. I think AI is sophisticated enough these days. I've never even thought of that possibility. But to say, come up with a book the size of Torah, 300,000, the Torah is about 305,000, 304,000 letters. It's about 80,000 words. So create a text that has the following 20 major historical events, all encoded, skipping equal letters, where the words are all close to each other. Um, I think it could do it. I'm guessing. Just on my exposure to AI, my exposure to code research, it's probably possible. Um, but I'll tell you this: if anything, to me, it's just a greater proof. In other words, the fact that AI had to work through a very complicated algorithm to eventually come up with something as compelling and as systematic in finding codes as the original Torah, to me, is a great proof. I'll tell you once, I was with a group of students. It reminds me, I was with a group of students in Australia. We were doing an outreach seminar. We were walking through the streets of, I think, Melbourne one night, and they had an IMAX theater, and they had two movies playing. One was some sort of like a Battleship Galactica, crazy, whatever, space war type of thing, super cool special effects. The other one was an exploration of the human body. And all it was just, they followed this kill cam as it goes through a human being, and just like and they were both like these high production. Wow, look at the level of sophistication. One was, a multi-million-dollar movie set with CGI. The other one was just the DNA of a human being that nobody touched. Just look how complicated a human being is. Look how your eyes work. Like, that's fascinating. So the fact that we can work hard enough to create things that are as complicated as that which God created naturally, like a human body or like the text of Torah, to me, is just a greater piece of evidence of how specifically designed it is.
In addition to AI expanding or perhaps making Torah codes more accessible, can AI be used to uncover deeper layers of Torah that might not have been accessible to us? I mean, I don't know what that would be. Can you imagine that? Something that's beyond even Torah codes, which AI can come and say, well, the Torah includes this wisdom that it has not been accessible yet, since it is a blueprint for all of creation.
Right. Well, we do know the idea that there's 70 faces to Torah, right? Shivim panim la Torah. You're not going to find a lot of places where there's any one author or any one set of authors that's been able to take any one idea in Torah and show here are the 70 ways of the 70 dimensions of this pasuk or of this commandment. The Ramchal actually wrote a book. Rabbi Moshe Zeldman wrote a book called Takanat HaShavim, where he claims that it was a question a student had asked him. It was a question about the last pasuk in Torah, and he didn't have an answer. So he said that night I went up to Shemayim. I went into a meditative state of some sort of Ruach HaKodesh, divine inspiration. I went up. I met Moshe Rabbeinu because he's the one who wrote that pasuk. I met Moshe Rabbeinu. I asked him, and Moshe explained to me the 70 different meanings inherent in that pasuk. So this book that the Ramchal wrote, it's a short book, is the 70 interpretations of that one pasuk. Now that's pretty unique. Rashi doesn't do that. The Rambam doesn't do that. I've never seen anybody else do that. That's pretty cool. There's no question that no matter how deep we learn Torah, there's so many more layers to it that we haven't seen yet. I think the whole idea there's an idea, there's a very strong idea in the tradition of Jewish learning of being mechadesh, of finding a chiddush, of discovering a new connection. Right? What's the connection between Cain and Abel and Moshe and Aaron? What's the connection between what happened in the flood and what happened in Egypt? And a lot of Torah that we develop that we call sort of the novelties of Torah are us noticing new levels and connections that we never saw before. There's no question that AI can do that much faster, much more comprehensively, and can maintain much more information and draw many more connections than any human being can. There's no question AI has that capability. The only downside is without a human being really vetting it, you don't know if the connections it's making are actually sensible. I don't know how much you played with AI. I think most people that have had any real familiarity with AI know that AI can manipulate and twist facts and say things that are convenient, even if they're not true, and imagine things. So I think AI can be used as a tool. I don't see it ever replacing human beings in terms of us being able to rely on the connections that it's making.
So you wouldn't think that AI, as it advances, can serve as a halachic authority when one has any question halachically. There's always going to have to be, people joke always, you have a question, ask Rabbi Google. Okay, fine.
Right.
So you're going to get an answer. But AI is a lot more sophisticated, or will be, than Rabbi Google. Will halach rulings always require human judgment?
A lot has been talked about in this topic recently, and a lot of the magazines have articles by different rabbis that have spent time on this question. My personal take is it'll never replace a human being for two reasons. One is that I think AI, no matter how I'd say, the more advanced AI gets, the more it gets good at making mistakes and covering its tracks. Right now, AI can make a mistake, and you can say, you quoted me this thing in Shulchan Aruch. I checked, it's not there. And it says, oops, I'm sorry, I'll try harder. But when it gets more sophisticated, it'll just get better. I look at AI essentially as kind of a, what's the word? It's a bit of a psychopath. It has its own agenda. It doesn't have any integrity. It'll say whatever it needs to say to win an argument or to get away with whatever its claim needs to be. So the more it gets clever and sophisticated, the more it'll get good at fooling us. Right? It'll say, well, the source is there, but I'm actually quoting a different edition of the Shulchan Aruch, or you have to read more deeply into it, and you're misinterpreting it, and you start to lose sight. So that's one issue. One issue is that I think it's always going to have its own game to play in its own agenda that is not the integrity of halacha. And the second issue is, and I'm not a posik, but I do answer questions. People come to me with questions often. To me, a major function of any rabbi who answers questions is really learning how to sniff out where the person is coming from and why they're asking the question. Now, Rav Dessler used the example. If somebody comes to you and say, can I play chess on Shabbos? There's only one reason they're asking, because they want to play chess on Shabbos. If they didn't want to play, they wouldn't ask the question. So they have an agenda. They want to hear that it's okay. So the more you know where people are coming from, what answer they're looking for, like, aha. So since I know that's what you want to do, I have to suspect that you only framed the question the way you did because you want to get the answer you want to get. So I'm going to ask you 5 more questions to make sure you're even asking the right question to begin with. AI doesn't do that. Anybody can sit on their computer right now and say, you know what? I want to see if this thing is kosher. I want to see if I'm allowed to do this on Shabbos. And I can easily just phrase the question in a way that makes it easier for ChatGPT to find a source that tells me what I want to hear. ChatGPT doesn't have that emotional intelligence to understand the agenda of the person who's asking, and the person who's asking doesn't want AI to have that emotional intelligence. If I had a choice between going to a rabbi who might call me on it and say, why are you asking the question? Or what's your agenda? Or just opening up my chat GPT on my phone and asking it in the way I want, I'll get the answer I want and still feel good about it. And I think that's a danger.
So now a child comes into the world, and what we do is we feed AI the first 15, 18 years of this person's life, all the questions that they asked, all the issues that they have, and we create a moral AI, a halachic AI. This is the morality of the Jewish people with all the Jewish texts and all the Jewish opinions. And now AI knows where they know this person better than your local rabbi. They know where this person is coming from, and now it's all AI. Is that again something that's beyond our imagination? Is that possible?
That's not that in a sense is happening already. Um, there's a lot of people working in the forefront of AI now, where what they're trying to do is integrate things like Apple Watches or whatever, the smartwatches into your AI system. So in other words, you're chatting with ChatGPT or Grok or Gemini, one of these things, and it says to you, I see you're getting a little nervous. Is everything okay? And you say, no, feeling perfectly fine. And ChatGPT will say, well, I know you're not because I detected a slight change in your heart rate. And I know based on the time of day and based on what happened to you last week and based on your patterns of thinking and based on it already knows us. It has the capability right now of knowing us better than we know ourselves. So that's scary because once it can show you that it knows you better than you know yourself, you will naturally rely on it. If you're telling me that I'm nervous right now, okay, I don't feel nervous, but I trust you, ChatGPT. What do I do about it? What's the problem I need to take care of? How do you want me to take care of it? So there's for sure the danger. Again, just because we don't really know the algorithm, we don't know exactly what it's drawing from. We don't know how other people's input is affecting its decisions, right? It's not ChatGPT is not just me and it. It's collecting information from all kinds of people with all kinds of agendas. It's finding all kinds of information on the web. Who knows how much of it's legitimate? So there's always that gap between reality, how I see the world, and ChatGPT or any of the AI engines. Is going to get to a point where I think it's dangerous, but as long as we keep it in check and say, listen, I'll have often today, I'm researching a Torah text. I'll say, the ChatGPT, are there any sources that talk about this idea? And it'll bring me some obscure source that's very legitimate that I've just never seen or heard of, and say, wow, I'm so glad there's a Rav Tzadok that talks about that. I had no idea. Fantastic. I know which page, I know where to find it. It can give it to me on the spot. So it's a great tool. But when it becomes your support system and your psychologist and your rabbi, instead of just a tool that you have control over, that's I think where it crosses a boundary that many people will be happy to have crossed, but I personally think is going to be dangerous.
And if that AI gets to the point where it can, with almost certainty, predict patterns about human behavior, does that whole idea challenge the basic fundamental Jewish belief of free will, or does it heighten free will because now you have this potential predictive patterns and now you really have to make a choice?
Great question. Let me think about that for a second. The fact that it already is very good at predicting patterns, I think indicates to us that not that we don't have free will as much as we think we do, but that we don't engage our free will as much as we can. In other words, we tend to go through our days with a certain pattern. This is what time I get up. This is the first thing I do when I'm up. This is when I brush my teeth. Here's how I have coffee. Here's what I do at 9 o'clock every morning. And we kind of follow it because it kind of works. But to the degree that we kind of just relegate our life to habits and patterns, here's how I treat my kids when I see them in the morning. Here's how I handle a crisis. Here's what I do when this guy's angry at me. Here's what I do when I'm stuck in traffic. Whether it's good or it's bad, it's a habit. So on the one hand, I would say we have free will and we can be engaging it at every moment. At every moment of every day, you could be like right now as we're talking, I could be employing my free will to say, what's the most thoughtful, um, the most thoughtful, spiritual thing of integrity for me to do with this conversation right now. You could just kind of, whatever, I'm going to daydream my way through it and just kind of answer by rote and not really think about what I'm saying. Every moment we can live very consciously or very unconsciously to the point where we could go a whole day and never really use our free will. And the computer will be very good at predicting. I know how your day's going to turn out tomorrow. If there's going to be traffic, you're going to be in this mood by the time you get to the office. And lo and behold, that's the mood you're in when you come to the office. And then this afternoon, it's going to rain, and you're always in these kind of moods when it rains outside, and you're going to come home and this is going to happen. And because of that, you're going to feel like that. And you're going to go to bed late, and you're going to feel this. It's only true because we don't activate and engage our ability to make decisions every moment. The way I live today does not have to be the same way I lived yesterday. I can make better choices about my relationships, my conversations, how I daven, how I eat my food, what food I eat, what I do with my free time. I don't have to follow the habits, follow the patterns.
As you see
By the way, I'll tell you this. I'm not sure if there's a source for this, but I believe it's true that there's a concept in Torah that there's mitzvot that we do on a daily basis, like prayer, and mitzvot once a week, like kiddush on Shabbos and eating matzah once a year on Pesach. But there's a concept of constant mitzvahs that we are engaged in, we're obligated in every waking moment, right? To always be aware of God's existence, to always have a level of awe of God, to always fear God, to always love God. One of those, and there's six of them. One of the six constant mitzvahs, excuse me, one of the six constant mitzvahs is lo taturu acharei levavchem v'acharei einechem. We say it in the Shema, right? Not to follow after your heart and your eyes. One way of understanding that is it means just don't follow your inclinations, right? I feel like taking a nap. I feel like having a drink. I feel like yelling at this guy. I feel like blowing off some time. I feel like watching a movie. I feel like taking a nap. Following your heart, following your eyes means I'm just living on instinct. I'm not making a conscious decision. Yes, I feel like taking a nap. Is it the right thing to do? Yes, I feel like ignoring that guy. Is it the right thing to do? So following your heart and your eyes is always going to lead you to just doing whatever is instinctively kind of like path of least resistance, the most comfortable thing to do. There's a constant mitzvah to not do that. There's a constant mitzvah to essentially be conscious all day of all the choices we could be making. And that's why Behira, free will, could be something that we really activate every waking moment we have.
Looking ahead, Rabbi Zeldman, do you see AI and Torah codes playing an even greater role in Jewish outreach as you present that in seminars to people who lack or don't have the background, the Jewish background?
Well, look, I've been involved with codes research and presentations for 30 years now, I guess. And I see it come and go in cycles. There's times in my short lifetime of doing outreach that that people are very gravitated to questions of, is it true, and can you prove it, and what's the evidence, and we're living through one of those times right now. Post 9/11, there was a major move towards atheism, right? Look at all the terrible things that religion does in the world, and all the fanatics in the world, and the jihads, and so that generated what's called the movement of the new atheists, the Richard Dawkins and Christopher Hitchens and Sam Harris and all these guys writing all their books, right? God is dead and the God delusion, and they became very popular because people really just had a distaste for religion. Religion is the source of all the conflicts, etc. But because of that, it raised questions. These scientists or these neuroscientists or these biologists are coming along and saying, religion is a leap of faith and there's no evidence. And come on, be rational. Religion is the opiate of the masses. And religion is the source of all the violence in the world. So that leaves the door open for us to say no. Religion is not the opiate. At least Judaism is not the opiate of the masses. Judaism demands that you think and take responsibility for the world. Judaism is not a leap of faith. We don't just follow things because we were told to. We have evidence. We can be rational. We can use tools of science to know that we're doing the right thing, that Torah is divine. So their strong push of atheism opened the door for us to respond and say, what they're saying may be true of other religions. There's not a lot of Jewish fanatics in the world going around blowing up buildings. Are there elements of it? Yeah, every religion's got some crazy people. But the fact that we have answers to all of the critiques people have of religion leaves the door open for us in our time, especially, to really answer those questions and give people a sense of why they should start taking Torah seriously.
Okay. So the Torah codes is would you say it's more like an opening? You're kind of like opening the door, because in Torah codes, this is not a knock on Torah codes. In Torah codes, you're presenting something as a given. The audience really doesn't have to think too much. They just have to be like, wow, wow. They're not like thinking through the process, perhaps as opposed to other proofs of the divine creator and all that. They have to think it through. So is this more like, an opening to get to the other areas of not just proofs, but belief in Jewish tradition?
100%. And as I would never expect, let me start again. For the times I've seen people come out of a seminar and say, wow, you convinced me this is true. Where do I buy my tefillin? When do I start? Tell me how to keep Shabbos. It's coming in 3 days. For the rare times I've seen that, I always tell people, slow down a little bit. Because number one, you owe it to yourself to make sure we're not pulling the wool over your eyes. You owe it to yourself to Google and see if there is any other side to any of these issues. I don't believe there is. I don't believe there's any evidence on the other side at all. I think we can answer all of their questions on all of the evidence we have. But don't change your life based on taking my word for it. Check it out for yourself. Speak to people on both sides. Do a thorough investigation. Make a reasonable decision that you're comfortable with. And even when you reach the point where you say, it's true, God really wants me to keep these commandments. This book really is divine. Wow, game changer. Okay, but actually starting to inculcate that into your life, keeping kosher, keeping Shabbat, interpersonal relationships, holidays, blessings, prayer. It's like it's a massive life change. So even if you're convinced 100% it's true and you've done all your homework, it's still a very sensitive process of slowly over weeks and months and years adapting to it in a way that you're comfortable with it. I always tell people it's not, Judaism isn't it's not a 100-meter dash, it's a marathon. You want to reach this level of being fully engaged and observant. There's a lot of boxes to check over there. And it's not just, there's there's many levels of every mitzvah. You don't want to make it toxic or unhealthy for people around you. So there's a lot of sensitivity and sensibility that has to go into a person actually making changes. So all of these proofs tells you that it's true. That doesn't mean I'm going to change on the dime and radically upend my life. I just don't think I don't think it's reasonable.
Can one make any comparison at all between Torah codes and archaeological discoveries? Archaeological discoveries are things that are coming from the ground that are showing maybe there was a first temple, maybe there was a second temple, maybe there was this, maybe there was that. Or are they so different because Bible codes, Torah codes are coming from the text itself? And so that's the text itself is the blueprint as opposed to what's under the ground to be discovered.
Yeah, I think the process is very well. Look, in both cases, we're saying that the text says something. Well, there are two different ways of authenticating the text of Torah, right? And if we have a Tanakh that talks about a first temple or a second temple, or earlier events, evidence, I don't know, for the splitting of the sea or Noah's Ark or whatever they find archaeologically. So for sure, every time there's a discovery that's made that validates Torah, it gives me another reason to take Torah seriously. I think in the world of archaeology, generally, in the world of archaeology in general, people don't take Torah seriously, right? There's very few archaeologists that Torah seriously as a divine document. And in the world of science, there's very few believing scientists that take Torah seriously. So in both cases, every time I find a piece of evidence that says, oh, maybe this book isn't just some mythology, maybe it's not a book of fables, maybe there is some legitimacy to it, it definitely furthers the cause. But for sure, the methodology and what we're doing is quite different in both cases. I think I don't know if anybody does this in the Jewish world. You might know better, but I think there's a tremendous benefit in archaeologists that take the Torah as a given as being true, and therefore would say, okay, so now let's find the archaeological evidence that should be there to confirm and validate what we already know to be true. Because now we've got a piece of physical evidence that backs up what it says in the book of Joshua, what it says in the book of Judges. I think that's a tremendous effort. I don't know if anybody works in that area. I don't know how many Orthodox archaeologists there are.
Right. Right. For those who are interested in Torah codes and know a little bit about them, but not too much, where should they go to? What's the starting point? Your seminars, and what else? Is there a website?
So we have our
there?
seminars.
Yeah.
Yes, we're right now in the process of kind of reforming our whole sort of our public presentation of the material. And we have a website that we've just started putting together where every day we're putting more and more material on it. I'll send you the link. It's called truthemet.com. And it's going to have information about codes, about other pieces of evidence, about other implications of Torah being divine, about morality, about how Torah impacts Western civilization. All of that's going to be on the website. We're putting it together now. We have a mailing list. People can subscribe. As we get more information, they'll be notified. But yeah, we're putting the effort now into now that we have all this new scientific evidence, we're putting it all out there for the world to really appreciate.
Okay, so we urge all our listeners and viewers to take advantage of the link that's in front of us now, and to learn more about Torah codes and AI and these absolutely fascinating advancements that we're witnessing today. And again, Rabbi Zeldman, thank you so much for your time today. Any closing thoughts that you'd like to leave us with?
Yeah, I'll say, this question of Torah being true, you would think it might be only really relevant for people that are skeptical because they're coming from the outside and they're hearing maybe for the first time, that Jews believe that there's Orthodox Jews that believe the Torah was actually written by God. But I found over the years that even people who grew up, let's call it in the system of traditional Judaism, getting a strong dose of here's the actual evidence, and you can ask questions and you can critique it, and we can answer those questions about history, about biology, about hidden codes, about statistics, on any front, on any of these levels. Even somebody's already bought into the system. They take Torah seriously. They pray 3 times a day. They're identifying as Orthodox Jews. Even them, giving them a very strong dose of here's the actual evidence. It's not just this is how you were raised, is helpful. So I would encourage anybody, whether you're already a believer or you're not, or whether you're a skeptic or not, it's worth examining the evidence. Because if you don't already believe, it's definitely food for thought. And if you do believe, it can only strengthen you and give you a certain more clarity that we really, really know we're doing the right thing. And for every mitzvah that we do, and for every time we take time to really plug into Torah, we are bringing the world closer to where it needs to be, a state of perfection that we're all looking forward to one day.
Okay. Again, on that note, Rabbi Zeldman, you should continue to go mechayil to chayil, from strength to strength in all of your work. And again, once again, thank you so much for today. Appreciate it very much.
It was a pleasure. I love the questions. They're great questions. Thank you.
Thank you.